thing that keeps coming up, and I think the reason this comes up is because of some religious beliefs, really, that God is forgiveness. When we die, we go to heaven, everything is fine, it was all a big mistake, we all been through a gameplay, it's nothing more than just a film, we've just come out of, but in reality everything is love and light. But that unfortunately is not the case, because we are working with energies all the time. While we are alive, we are working with energies. Everything in this universe is based on energies. Whether we say good morning to somebody, we are actually sending out energy. If we swear at somebody in a road rage, we're sending out energies, and these energies have to go somewhere, and they are real things, and they don't just sort of dissipate when we die. And that is the thing we have to bear in mind, that the afterlife, exactly as I said before, like this life, is all part of nature. Our multidimensional reality, they're all natural events. They're all based on nature, on natural forces, on the forces of nature. And there is no miracle taking place in a sense that it is outside of the laws of nature. Even if very beautiful things happen, they are following certain causalities and rules. So the idea that we are, let's say we have committed horrendous crimes in our life, and we just sort of wash our hands and just go to heaven and are received by angels and everything is good. No, that doesn't work. It doesn't happen like that, because we have certain energies put out there. And these energies had recipients, and the recipients have been very badly traumatized by our action. Their relatives have been traumatized. They are going through a process. They are releasing other energies, and these energies inevitably are connected to the perpetrator, to the originator of these energies. And very soon we find ourselves in a sort of boiling pot where various energies need to be worked out and need to be balanced. Time we spent in the afterlife to come to terms with these energies, to work with them. Some of these energies, they are so traumatic and so big that they are rooted in a very, very deep subconscious level, which we may not even address for maybe a dozen lifetimes, but eventually they will come out, and they will haunt us, and they will lead us into experiences where we understand what we have actually done. Now, in lots of cases, these energies play out at death, where we are having a life review. A life review is the mildest form of addressing these energies. And what happens during the life reviews, we see, people always say, the life flashed in front of my eyes. This is actually what happens. It's not a linear process where one thing happens after the other. It's a life review is an information package where we can see everything that happens in our life, sometimes in a flash, and then very often it's not only what we have experienced, but also what we caused other people to experience. So we then realize that we are part of the energy stream. So the person we have wronged, suddenly we feel the wrong we have committed, not from our side, but from the person's side. And that can result in a trauma for ourselves when we suddenly find, oh my God, what have I done? How can I undo this? And that is very often part of the problem people have to deal with when they die, and they have to address their issues. And of course, it can also have positive implications, because then people learn, they modify their behavior, they become more, maybe more compassionate. everything is a learning process, you know. But these things on the Afterlife review, this is one on the lowest level where it plays out. Recently, a few days ago, there was a terrorist attack in London where 2 people were murdered. And in my past book, I have written about in great detail what happens to people who had committed this kind of atrocity. I recorded in Vistas of Infinity. And I think a couple of years ago there was another one where I met the person who had killed these people in London on London Bridge. And I could see what happened to them, where they were, you know. And I saw this person, one person in particular, he was who was shot by the police. He was in a desert and tied to a post, and swords were raining down on him, and he felt this intense pain of his regret. He suddenly realized what he has done was wrong. So they're very different kinds of things, that the way these energies using metaphors to work themselves out, to show themselves up in the person's experience, you know. There's an infinite variety how these energies are balanced. So that's the answer to that question. No, it's both, really. Our feelings, what we experience at death, may transport us into the appropriate environment. Again, what I have experienced is when I was out of body, my guide took me to a chap who died of an infection, and he was in a fever, in a state of feverish turmoil, and he had these nightmarish visions, and I guided him through his nightmare scenario until he came out on the other side. So there are helpers who then come to the aid when people have, let's say, nightmarish vision, or they suffer fear as a result of the condition they're in. They usually have helpers who help them through these traumatic experiences they sometimes find themselves in. And at that time I was helping a number of other people through this process of death, and that's what I experienced. But inevitably, after they come through this traumatic experience, I have to say there is more like an exception in death, you know, that some people go through these states, but it does happen. But when they come out on the other side, they very often are looked after and taken care of, and then their normal character or their emotional vibration will take over and will determine the kind of life they will settle into, you know. Now that is a thing which I have experienced, because my mother, before she died, she went through a state of depression. And what happened with her, for quite some time afterwards, she was looked after by my grandmother. But just like people here, when they go through a state of depression, sometimes it's very difficult to find to get through to them, to break through. They have to somehow live through their depression. They have to find a way to get out of it. And as I said right at the beginning, the afterlife is not that different to this life, you know. So as people sort of attacked me and said, look, this sounds really gruesome, are you really telling us that people who have suffered depression, they will still be depressed? They don't have to be. It depends what the cause of the depression is. It can be that a certain energy which is directed towards them can actually lift them almost instantly out of the depression, like it happens down here. And I would say the possibilities are there. They are even much better than dealing with people here, because what we do here, the only way we can deal with it on this level is very often using drugs. That can also happen on the next level, by the way, that people using drugs, basically things which are filled with very, very powerful energy and very positive energy, so they can be literally fed. There's another experience I had that relates to the aspect of food. People very often say, oh, well, there's no food because there's no body which needs sustenance. But again, we're talking about energy. The body is an energy system. So are our emotions. So is our astral body. It's an energy system. So we can feed energy into the astral body using all sorts of metaphors. We can give somebody a drink, and the drink may be filled with energy so the person feels better. A person who loves the person, who is full of compassion, go to the person who is depressed and gives them energy, gives them an energy drink, and just the fact that they're looked after, that they're not longer alone, and that they're in good company, can break through the depression much better than it's possible here. So that's an experience I had, that people, for example, especially on higher levels, you can eat a fruit from a beautiful tree and you can feel incredibly refreshed after that, because what you are actually consuming is not a physical fruit, it's a form of energy. So all these things still take place on the astral level. If you jump into a river on the astral level, suddenly you feel totally refreshed, not just like you would here, where you feel cleansed, but on the astral level, if you jump into a crystal clear river, suddenly you feel your life forces are rejuvenated, you feel better, you feel younger, you feel clearer, you feel cleaner, and so on. So that's again, we're talking about energies, and so a person who has been depressed will have a much greater chance to work through this depression. In the case of my mother, I found her in a kind of cocoon where she sort of sealed herself in, because she had quite a hard life, and she was processing all the things that happened in her life in this sort of self-reflective state. And my grandmother told me that she was okay, that she was looking after her. And sure enough, after a few months, I met her again, and she was as good as new. I remembered her, how she looked as when I was a child, and there was this incredible reunion with my mother. We hugged, and she looked absolutely beautiful, And since then, of course, I spent many times, I met her again. So yes, people, if you're dealing with depression, people will have to find a way to deal with their issues. They have to do that here, and they have to do that in the afterlife. Well, I would say a person who commits suicide, or they go to a clinic to end their pain, they're simply making use of their freedom of will. For example, there's nothing that compels you. People take painkillers when they go through pain. If the pain is so unbearable, they may use another form of pain relief by asking to have their physical life taken away from them. And you have to bear in mind, nature is not based on moralistic grounds. Nature is cause and effect. If a person chooses to end their life because they feel they can no longer live with their pain, there is a freedom of choice. There are no repercussions because nobody is harmed. Very often people who end their lives, they have the agreement of their relatives and friends, and they don't want to see them suffer. So there is no authority outside themselves which says you shall live your life as God has given it to you, otherwise you go to hell if you don't do that. No, there are no such laws. These which we invent, there are laws which some religious beliefs sort of inflict on us. But in reality, we are born free. We are responsible what we do with our lives, as long as we don't affect the lives of others. Our actions don't affect the lives and the freedom of others. The reality is that their nature doesn't judge in the same way. We are our own judge. If we feel guilty for having taken our life, that's our problem then. That's what we have chosen. No, the thing is, first of all, he's not alone. He won't be feeling any better if you joined him, because the person who has gone to the other side is not deprived of your presence, You are still visible to him. And the best thing you can do is to operate on the level of love for him. And that is best served if you're on this life. And the love you give to the person who's committed suicide is to give love, because love is a very powerful healing energy, First of all, it relieves you of the suffering, of the bereavement, and perhaps even the guilt you may feel, or the other multitudes of feelings relatives very often feel. Could I have avoided it? Could I have done it better? Could I have done anything? The only thing we can really do, and which is very, very powerful, is to love the person in the same way as if the person was still alive here. Because in reality, that is exactly what is taking place. The person we feel we have lost is nowhere else but here with us. And the moment we love, we show our love, not only do we make our presence felt, but it will be a beautiful presence. It will be a presence which will enrich the person we have lost through suicide. And also the healing energy is very, very, very powerful. The healing energy of love will take the person into a higher vibratory level, into a much better environment. And this can happen right now, this moment, the moment you think about the person, you feel sorry about it and you worry about it. No, don't give way to these kind of feelings. Just convert them into love. And that is 10 times, 100 times more powerful than any thought can be. So I would say the person who committed suicide has done so because they were in some sort of pain, in an emotional pain, which is much harder to heal than a physical pain. And this emotional pain, usually they take over with them. And very often what people who commit suicide, they feel a sense of regret after they realize, because all their attention was centered around themselves. And after they realize that they affected other people who are now deprived of them, they feel guilt and they feel regret. And it's up to us to comfort these people, to give them our love and let them know, no, we still love you, nothing has changed. And sooner or later, of course, we will be reunited, but we make the transition for these people much better when we show them love. Love is an incredibly powerful energy, and I have seen it radiating. I've seen it as light forms. I've seen it transforming people, you know, coming from the physical level, how it sort of uplifts people and how it changes whole environments. You know, people live in dire circumstances on the astral plane, and the love the person left behind shows them, suddenly illuminates the whole environment. You know, it's very, very powerful. Yes, why not? I mean, you know, first of all, they will realize they have found relief of their pain. If they don't have any issues with this form of action they have taken, then why should there be any other thing than celebration, you know? It's up to us. I mean, there are people... there's a consensus amongst physicians that at any cost we should extend life, no matter what. You know, that is a sort of ethical consensus amongst the medical profession, that life is to be cherished over everything. I agree, because there's only life, you know, and the best quality of life, with a person's agreement, if they feel they can get the best treatment, then of course they should accept that, you know. But if they feel there's no other way, then it's up to them to decide, you know. So we have these certain rules. We made up these rules because we think there's such a thing as death. We think there's life and there's death. And in our culture, we are led to believe that death is the worst thing that can happen to us, you know. But we don't realize that there is no such thing. It's just a continuation of the forms. Now, of course, there is a lot to be said for life on this physical planet. It's a very, very powerful way of gathering experience. Therefore, I think one should do everything possible to make the best possible use out of this life, even if it means going through a terrible pain and terrible suffering, you know, because there are lessons connected to this type of life which are invaluable and which we may have chosen deliberately in order to learn things which we couldn't have possibly learned in any other way. So that to me is paramount. This life is very, very important. It can be very hard, but it's also very, very valuable, and we spend a lot of time incarnating in order to have the experience, and we shouldn't just sort of dismiss it lightly because we are sort of biased towards you know, comfort, you know. So yes, it's just my personal opinion.
And my question is, you know, Emanuel Swedenborg also had these waking, out-of-body afterlife, you know, excursions. And I'm wondering if you see yourself in the same tradition and experience as Swedenborg.
Yeah, it's funny, really. I've only, in the last couple of years, I've been made aware of Swedenborg's work, and I started reading about him, and I find there's a lot of congruence between his experiences and mine. But of course he had a different reference system, you know, living sort of 300 years ago or so. Yes. But I feel there's a lot of the things which he said, which I think, yes, this is very, very familiar to me, what he's talking about. Now, the other thing is, of course, he uses some interesting metaphors, you know, which I wouldn't use, you know. And the Swedenborg Society, they very often take his metaphors literally. you know, and that I think that's gives the wrong picture really, because he said that there are different entries point into the astral world, like a physical place. There are holes in the ground and so on, and like this. But I think he was just using metaphors, and they shouldn't be really taken quite as literally as they are often taken, you know. But on the whole, I find, yes, I mean, basically he was an out-of-body experiencer. He was a lot more talented than I was, you know. He was also he was a scientist, a philosopher, you know. He was quite a remarkable person, really. I'm nowhere near, but I mean, the only thing I did have is I had these out-of-body experiences where I was able, and I think the only thing, the good thing is in my case, because I wasn't really ever interested in out-of-body experience. I was only interested in meditation, and these out-of-body experiences came more as a byproduct, you know, of my meditation. And I'm still primarily interested in meditation and into, you know, entering into higher states of consciousness. So I meditate every morning 1 or 2 hours, and my prime motivation is getting into this higher state of consciousness of unity or samadhi. And then this of course is where all the revelations one seeks sort of take place, you know. That's where I think I'm taking notes now, but this will be the context of a new book if it comes out, you know. This will be from this level written rather than out of body. I had quite a few actually, you know, where I had some incredibly uplifting, ecstatic experiences during my out-of-body state. The first one was in 1980, where I went through different states of consciousness into samadhi. You know, I've described this experience in my book, Vistas, Multidimensional Man, towards the end, where I was trained by a guide on the astral level, a Chinese master, who took me through these different levels of states of consciousness, you know, where I was seen, where I was going into the higher realms until I reached the state of clarity of samadhi. You know, that was in 1980. Yes, the most distressing OB for me was when I met a suicide bomber. You know, when I was taken into and I described the story in the book Vistas of Infinity in great detail. And I wanted to know for a long time what happens to people who kill a lot of people and kill themselves. Is it true that they, you know, enter paradise? And the thing is, no, it's not. And the thing is, what I explained earlier, is they're releasing energies which they will find very hard to deal with, you know. And without going into any detail, but the environment I found myself in was really horrific, you know, was really traumatic, and I felt really sorry for these guys. And there were quite a few people, and they were in an environment where they still, with other people who were in a similar mindset, they were still fighting phantoms, they were killing other people who were just figments of the imagination, who had taken on a reality of their own. And it was a very distressing thing to witness, you know. I've witnessed other things, but the thing is, when I go into the lower dimensional levels, I'm usually not affected by it, and very often I'm not even seen by people when I'm there, you know. I'm still in this present here and now state of mind, which gives me a kind of safety shield, so I'm not really affected negatively. That's a thing. I think if you can keep your mindset, if you live in a positive state, you can keep your mindset with you. It doesn't matter where you go. Even if you go into a quite hellish environment. No, I have never seen this, and I can't imagine that would take place. The children I've encountered, they're usually very, very cheerful, like children are. When and there's no way a negative energy can get close to them, because it's just not possible over there. It's an impossibility. The thing is, it's beautiful because children, they are so highly sought after on the astral realm. They will find the most loving people who never had the opportunity to have their own children. It's a bit like some adoptive parents, They are adoptive parents because they just really, really overwhelmed by the desire to have children and the love. Very often children who have been adopted find their parents are absolutely, the best parents they could have wished for. And that is the same thing. There will hardly be any child living on the astral level who will be unloved, And this love alone will keep any other negative energy totally away from them, And that's one of the most beautiful things when people think, okay, I lost my child, that however tragic it is, they can be sure of one thing, that is they're totally loved. The moment they get there, they're in a heavenly environment. And that's how I saw it whenever I saw children. I saw how cheerful they were, how beautiful. There was always light around them. There was always beautiful summery environment. And, and that's basically what anybody who lost a child, they should take comfort in the fact that their children are looked after and they have the best possible time.